For centuries, believers were told that the bodies of saints never rotted. Their flesh was said to remain pure, a divine sign that they had been chosen by God. Pilgrims traveled for weeks to see these sacred corpses, convinced they held miraculous power. But behind the heavy curtains of cathedrals and the whispers of the clergy, some bodies did not stay holy. They decayed, they smelled, they festered, and when that decay could no longer be hidden, a dark secret was born. For the faithful, it meant shattered illusions. For the church, it meant a desperate cover-up. What happens when the supposed proof of holiness turns into undeniable proof of rot? Tonight, we uncover the disturbing truth. This is the haunting story of faith corruption. The Middle Ages was an age of faith, but also an age of fear. For common men and women, life was short, brutal, and uncertain. Disease swept through villages with little warning. Wars ravaged fields and towns, and famine claimed thousands when harvests failed. In such a fragile world, people desperately searched for signs of divine protection, something to prove that holiness still existed among mortals. And nowhere was this longing more visible than in the cult of saints. To the medieval mind, saints were not just holy figures of the past. They were protectors of the present. Their relics, bones, clothing, hair, even drops of blood were treasured as if they were pieces of heaven itself. To touch a relic was to brush against eternity. Churches and monasteries competed to house these sacred remains, for relics meant power, wealth, and endless streams of pilgrims. A holy corpse could transform a forgotten village chapel into one of the most visited sites in Europe. But there was one phenomenon above all that captivated the faithful: incorruptibility. The belief was simple yet profound. If a person truly lived a holy life, their body would resist decay after death. Unlike common men, who turned to dust and worms, saints' bodies would remain whole, sweet-smelling, and almost lifelike. This was not just a spiritual idea. Pilgrims claimed to have seen the untouched corpses of saints with their own eyes, lying in crypts as if asleep, their faces serene, their skin untouched by time. The smell of decay, so dreaded in daily life, was replaced by what believers called the odor of sanctity, a fragrance of roses or lilies. For the church, incorruptibility was more than a miracle, it was a tool. It gave physical evidence to the power of God and silenced skeptics who dared question faith. Bishops and abbots knew well that a saint's incorrupt body could fill their coffers, for pilgrims would travel great distances to kneel before it, leave offerings, and spread stories of miracles. Entire towns grew rich on the reputation of a holy corpse. But behind the flickering candles and golden reliquaries lay a troubling reality. Most bodies rotted. Nature did not care for piety. Even the most devout monk or abbess upon death faced the same fate as a criminal hanged in the town square, flesh that bloated, darkened, and split apart. Priests and caretakers knew this, and yet the belief in incorruptibility was too powerful to let go. Thus, the stage was set for one of the darkest secrets of the medieval church: the desperate attempts to disguise rot as miracle. The first cracks appeared during public exhumations. When a holy person died, their body was often examined years later to prove incorruptibility. A bishop would order the coffin open before witnesses. If the body was intact, it was hailed as a miracle, a step toward canonization. But what if the coffin revealed not a serene saint, but a foul-smelling, half-rotted corpse? What if the very proof of holiness was missing? For the church, such a discovery could destroy the faith of thousands. Thus, methods of concealment were born. Corpses were sometimes washed in perfumes, covered in wax, or clothed in layers of rich garments to hide the disintegration beneath. In some cases, bones were carefully arranged, with wax masks placed over skulls to mimic lifelike features. To the pilgrims, these figures seemed untouched by time. To the caretakers, it was a desperate illusion. But the faithful did not know. To them, incorruptibility remained one of the great proofs of divine power. They whispered stories of saints whose bodies glowed faintly in the dark, of martyrs whose wounds never festered. of nuns whose faces remained youthful decades after death. Each tale grew more fantastic than the last, cementing incorruptibility as central to the medieval imagination. Yet, for every miracle whispered in candlelit chapels, there were priests and gravediggers who knew another truth. They had seen with their own eyes what lay beneath the veils and perfumes. They had smelled the stench when the coffins were first cracked open. They knew that the line between saint and sinner, miracle and rot, was thin, terrifyingly thin. And so it was that one day, in the heart of Christendom, the body of a saintly figure was revealed not as incorrupt, but as corrupted. Rot had set in, skin sloughed off, maggots stirred. What should have been proof of holiness became proof of mortality. But instead of admitting the truth, the church moved quickly, desperately, to protect its most dangerous secret. This is where the story darkens. For the faithful would never be told that their beloved saint was rotting in his coffin. Instead, they would be shown masks of wax, adorned in silks, and told that the odor of sanctity lingered. The truth was hidden, buried beneath layers of ritual and lies. And yet, rumors spread, rumors of priests fainting when coffins were opened, of stinking crypts sealed forever, of miracles that were anything but divine. The cult of incorruptibility was both a comfort and a curse. It gave believers hope that holiness triumphed over death, but it also demanded silence when that hope crumbled into rot. And in the case of one particular saint's corpse, the silence could not be maintained forever. For as the years passed, too many had seen, too many had smelled, too many had whispered, and the church's darkest fear loomed. What if the faithful discovered that the body of their beloved saint had not been preserved by God, but was instead no different from their own? The story begins not in silence, but in celebration. The saint in question, let us call him Sanctus Aurelius, though his name has been lost beneath layers of legend, was a beloved figure of the late Middle Ages. Born of humble origins, he rose to fame as a healer, a preacher, and a defender of the poor. His reputation for holiness spread far beyond his diocese, and when he died in the late 13th century, his followers clamored for immediate recognition of sainthood. His funeral was an event unlike any other. Thousands gathered in the cathedral square. Bells tolled, incense filled the air, and the bishop himself declared that Aurelius's death was not an end, but a victory. The coffin was sealed, placed in the cathedral crypt, and pilgrims soon began arriving by the hundreds, eager to pray at his tomb. Within weeks, miracles were reported: blind women claiming to see, barren couples conceiving children, and dying men restored to health after touching his resting place. The church, seeing the opportunity, petitioned Rome for Aurelius's canonization. But before any saint could be officially recognized, one test remained: the opening of the coffin. Years later, as required, his body would be examined to prove incorruptibility. At first, whispers spread through the clergy that Aurelius's body indeed resisted decay. Monks claimed to smell roses near his tomb. Candle flames supposedly burned brighter in his presence. Word traveled quickly. The saint was untouched by death. Pilgrims began leaving offerings of gold and silver. The cathedral's coffers swelled. But when the appointed day for exhumation finally arrived, something went terribly wrong. The coffin was carried before a crowd of clergy, noble patrons, and select witnesses. Candles flickered in the dim crypt as the bishop gave the signal. The lid was pried open with solemn care. A wave of stench struck the gathered men with the force of a hammer. Several gagged. One young cleric fainted outright. Inside lay not the serene figure of a saint, but a nightmare of decomposition. Aurelius's skin had blackened, stretched tight across bones. His jaw hung slack, teeth exposed in a ghastly grin. His hands were curled into claws. Worms had long since burrowed through his robes, leaving hollow tunnels in the fabric. What should have been the proof of God's power was, in fact, undeniable proof of nature's cruelty. The bishop froze. For several moments, the only sound was the crackling of candle wicks and the labored breathing of horrified witnesses. Then came the murmurs, the questions. How can this be? Was he not a holy man? Has God abandoned him? The bishop knew that allowing such doubts to spread would be catastrophic. To admit that Aurelius's body was rotting would not only end his canonization, it would shake the very foundation of belief in incorruptibility. Pilgrims would stop coming, donations would dry up, and the cathedral's prestige would collapse. So he made a choice, a dark, pragmatic choice. That very night, the clergy gathered in secret. The corpse was carefully washed in wine and vinegar to mask the odor. Layers of perfume were poured over the body, but the stench of rot persisted. The monks debated what to do. Some argued that the truth should be confessed. Others, fearing scandal, insisted that deception was necessary for the greater good of the faithful. The decision was made. They would disguise the rot. Aurelius's corpse was dressed in new robes of silk and velvet. A thin mask of wax was molded and painted to resemble his living face. The shriveled hands were covered with golden gloves. The body, now more mannequin than man, was placed back in the coffin. From a distance, with candles dim and incense thick in the air, he looked serene once again. When the coffin was reopened weeks later for the public, the crowd gasped not in horror but in awe. "He is untouched!" they cried. "A miracle!" Pilgrims knelt, kissed the coffin, and left their offerings. The deception worked. But not all were convinced. Some of the clerics who had seen the body whispered what they knew. Rumors trickled through the town. Tales of the saint's foul stench spread from tavern to marketplace. A few bold voices claimed outright, "The saint is rotting." Yet the cathedral silenced these rumors with threats of excommunication. To speak of what lay beneath the wax mask was to blaspheme. And so the cult of Aurelius grew. His coffin became the centerpiece of the cathedral. Thousands traveled across Europe to glimpse his so-called incorrupt body. Miracles were recorded in carefully kept ledgers. Wealth continued to flow. The faithful never knew that beneath the robes and perfumes lay a corpse as decayed as any peasant buried in the earth. But the deception could not hold forever. Over time, the body continued to deteriorate. The wax mask cracked in the summer heat, revealing sunken bone beneath. Worms burrowed up through the coffin, crawling onto the robes. On more than one occasion, attendants had to secretly clean maggots off the saint's face before the pilgrims entered. The church faced a dilemma. To destroy the body would end the cult. To reveal the truth would destroy faith. So they doubled down. More wax, more perfumes, more silk. At last, when the body became too fragile to present, they declared it a miracle that the saint must never again be exposed to the air. The coffin was sealed permanently, locked with iron, and displayed as an untouchable relic. But beneath the gold and incense, the truth remained. Aurelius's corpse was no miracle. It was not incorruptible. It was a rotting, fragile body hidden beneath layers of lies. This was not an isolated case. Across medieval Europe, similar practices emerged. The so-called incorrupt saints displayed in churches were often nothing more than wax-covered skeletons. Some were stuffed with herbs to disguise the smell. Others were coated in resins or even embalmed in secret, though embalming was forbidden by the church as it interfered with God's will. And yet, for centuries, the faithful were never told. They prayed to corpses they believed were preserved by heaven, when in truth those corpses were preserved by human hands and by fear. The scandal of Aurelius was whispered but never recorded in official documents. The church buried the truth as carefully as it buried the body. But the story survived in rumors, in tavern tales, and in the uneasy silence of those who had seen what lay beneath the mask. The saint's rotten corpse became a symbol of something far greater, the fragile line between faith and fraud, between belief and deception. And once the faithful began to suspect the truth, the very foundation of the cult of incorruptibility trembled. The tale of Sanctus Aurelius did not end with the sealing of his coffin. In fact, it was only the beginning of a broader, darker story about faith, deception, and human obsession with holiness. For centuries, the church's handling of his rotting body became a template for how incorruptibility would be presented, and how inconvenient truths would be hidden from the faithful. Across Europe, Cathedrals and monasteries displayed bodies of saints and holy figures with uncanny similarities to Aurelius's case. Wax masks, silk robes, perfumes, and secret resins became standard tools of presentation. Pilgrims traveled for days, sometimes weeks, to pray to saints, whose lifeless eyes stared blankly beneath layers of artifice. Entire economies flourished on this manufactured holiness. Villages that were once poor became wealthy from the influx of offerings. Merchants thrived, inns flourished, and the coffers of the church swelled with gold. Yet beneath this wealth lay an invisible cost. The psychological toll on those entrusted with the secret was immense. Monks, priests, and caretakers were forced to live daily lies, convincing themselves that their deceit was justified by the greater good. They whispered prayers over corpses they knew were decomposing, pretending that miracles lingered where only decay remained. Some fell into madness, haunted by the stench and the knowledge that their hands had manipulated what the faithful believed to be divine. Others simply became cold, numb, accepting that human suffering, even spiritual deception, was a necessary part of maintaining order. But the more the church concealed, the more rumors spread. Pilgrims sometimes claimed to notice cracks in the wax masks or to smell faint decay beneath the incense. Tales emerged of attendants secretly gagging as they cleaned worms from hidden crevices of saintly corpses. In some cases, rival clergy threatened exposure, using the knowledge as leverage in political or ecclesiastical disputes. The fragile illusion that holiness could preserve the body was maintained only through fear, secrecy, and relentless control over information. The legacy of Aurelius's deception extended far beyond the medieval period. When Renaissance thinkers and scholars began to challenge church authority, they often cited the cult of incorruptibility as evidence of clerical manipulation. Skeptical doctors and anatomists examined tombs, sometimes discovering what the medieval faithful had never been meant to see. Skeletons hidden beneath wax, masks concealing rotted flesh, coffins stuffed with straw and perfumes. These findings caused scandal among intellectuals, though the church publicly defended the miracles with careful reinterpretations or by claiming divine concealment. Even in modern times, historians and archaeologists uncover the reality of medieval relics. Studies using carbon dating, chemical analysis, and forensic examination reveal that many incorrupt saints were treated with preservatives, wax, and perfumes to maintain appearances. The bodies that survived intact were often exceptional cases of natural mummification rather than evidence of divine favor. Yet the stories of holiness, miracle, and incorruptibility remain powerful. The faithful still revere these relics, unaware of the layers of human intervention that conceal decay. The moral cost of this deception is as profound as the physical. The faithful were taught to believe in miracles where none existed, to pray to corpses rather than seek truth in life and deeds. The church's willingness to manipulate reality for power, prestige, and wealth reflects a disturbing intersection of faith and control. Behind the gilded altars, the incense, and the flickering candlelight lay a shadow of human ambition, fear, and the desperate desire to maintain authority over belief. And yet, there is a haunting human element to consider. Pilgrims and believers, unaware of the deception, found genuine comfort in the relics. Children prayed at the coffin, sick people touched it for healing, and entire communities were inspired to live more virtuous lives, believing they were under the protection of the saint. In a way, the illusion became real through the faith it inspired. But this raises profound ethical questions. Can faith built on lies ever be entirely innocent? Does the good it inspires justify the deceit? In the case of Sanctus Aurelius, the truth remained hidden for centuries. Only the most careful scholars, digging through archives and examining remnants of the corpse, began to piece together what truly happened. They found the wax masks, the layers of silk, and the traces of embalming substances. They traced the records of priestly meetings, the whispered instructions to clean and conceal, the letters cautioning caretakers never to reveal the rot. The saint, once celebrated for divine incorruptibility, became instead a symbol of human manipulation of faith. This story also serves as a warning about the dangers of unquestioning belief. When reverence turns into obsession and miracle is valued above truth, the line between devotion and deception blurs. The Church's handling of Aurelius's corpse reminds us that history is never just what is written in books or enshrined in cathedrals. It is also what is hidden, covered, and manipulated shapes beneath masks, stench beneath incense, rot beneath silk. Yet, despite the darkness, the story of Aurelius continues to captivate. Pilgrims still visit the cathedral where he rests, perhaps unaware of the wax mask and layers of concealment. Historians continue to debate the ethics of medieval religious practices. Philosophers ponder the tension between faith and truth. And the corpse, sealed and silent, remains a chilling testament to the extremes humans will go to preserve belief, even when the miracle has long since decayed. Ultimately, the hidden rot of Aurelius's corpse is more than a tale of a saint. It is a mirror reflecting the human desire for immortality, the fear of mortality, and the lengths people will go to maintain hope, even in the face of decay. It reminds us that history is rarely simple, that holiness can be manufactured, and that the stories we cherish may hide shadows as dark as any crypt. The Church eventually canonized Aurelius, but the truth remained known only to a few. Behind the altars, beneath the wax and silk, lay the reality that no mortal body, no matter how virtuous, could escape death. The saint's miracle was not in defying decay, but in the power of human hands to convince the world otherwise. And so, the legacy continues. Faith intertwined with artifice, devotion entwined with deception. The saint's body, forever sealed, reminds us that history often carries secrets too dark to be revealed, yet too important to forget. If this journey into the hidden truths of medieval sainthood shocked you, imagine what other secrets lie buried in history. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because every week we uncover the hidden truths the past tried to hide. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you pray to a saint if you knew the truth? The stories of history are darker and stranger than you can imagine, and we've only just begun.